Okay, this is a video of me explaining Ketu aspects. It's it aspects the fifth and ninth aspect from itself. Fifth and ninth aspect from itself. I do not use the seventh aspect when it comes to Ketu or Rahu because it gets very confusing because they're on the same axis. So if you do seven from it, you're looking at Rahu, and then you have to talk about Rahu, and then you have to talk about whatever planets and stuff is influencing Rahu. So it'll just become a very tongue twisting aspect to talk about. So I just focus on the fifth and ninth from K2. And as I told you in all my other videos, I sort of, when it comes to the aspects, I take the number that is associated, that numbered aspect, I associate the qualities of the house that's associated with that aspect, and I use it to help me interpret. Like, for example, the fifth aspect, I think of the fifth house, which is children, dating, romance, politics, learning, hobbies, gambling. That's the fifth aspect. All those things are something that you sort of just do in your leisure. You do in your free time. Something that you might be into, but it's not something that you gotta really give all of your life energy and your work to. You're just playing around with it. It's just something that you might do from time to time or whatever. The ninth aspect is teachers and gurus and fathers and the master of a profession, teaching. It's associated with something that you are going to focus on learning and mastering and perfecting in this lifetime. And it's associated with Dharma. It's the final Dharma house. The Dharma house is 159. Dharma essentially is like the righteous or correct way for your soul and for you to live and walk on in this life. It's the path that you should walk on or will walk on in this life. And usually the guidance of a father or a teacher or some spiritual guru or whatever, they help guide you onto the path that you should be on in this life, in a sense. So K2 now. Let's start with its significations. Ketu is known as a significator of moksha, which means essentially liberation, spiritual liberation, the separation of the soul from the body, or the separation of you being attached to the material sense, the materialistic things of this world. Ketu represents the stuff that you have already experienced in your last lifetime or over the course of several lifetimes. And depending on what house it's positioned in and what it's coming in contact with, it shows that because you have already dealt with this in a previous life, you likely will have no interest in that area of your life. Or, depending on how your chart look, you might have interest in that area. You might have a desire for the things in that area of your life, but when you go towards it, you feel unsatisfied or you just struggle with it. You're like, damn, I want this. But every time I go towards it, something always happens. Or once I go and get what I wanted, I'm not happy when I get it. And K2, in a weird sense, is trying to tell you, like, yo, dummy, you already experienced this before in your past lives. Unless you're going to experience the same thing in a uniquely different way, you're just going to be unsatisfied when you go towards this path again and again and again. And eventually, if you're maybe smart enough or spiritual enough or aware enough, maybe you'll do what K2 wants you to do in a general sense. It wants you to help get rid of your desires. It wants you to be like, okay, I don't need this. It wants you to be detached from it. It wants you to be liberated from these desires So it's almost like through those disappointments and negative experiences, it wants you to realize that, hey, I don't need to go through this path no more to be happy or whatever. I'll find something else. And I'm being real general. I don't really expect you to understand what the hell I'm talking about, unless you do understand what the hell I'm talking about. So that's essentially what K2 is. K2 is more microscopic and research oriented. It's more dissecting. It's more about, microscopic. It wants to go in, it's associated with the past. Rahu is more so associated with wanting to learn and discover things that we haven't discovered already. So these people are the ones who might want to maybe, I don't know, could be like a criminal detective, because you want to learn and see something that we haven't seen already. Or they could want to see things in outer space and study abstract type of things. But Rahu and Ketu both represent foreign, unusual things. So they both can sort of produce the same results in different ways of going about stuff. So I told you the 5th and 9th aspect. I told you some of the things that Ketu represents. Another thing that I forgot to mention about Ketu is that, it isn't a physical planet, as you should already know by now, I hope. It's a mathematical point. It's a mathematical position. And when Rahu and Ketu intersect, and when the moon or the sun hit these nodes at the right angle or whatever, you get an eclipse. And eclipses are associated with great changes and transformations. That's exactly what the position of Rahu and Ketu can do in your chart, and exactly what they can do with their aspects. And to study Rahu and Ketu, you really need to observe the sign that they're in, the planet that is the dispositor. So if Ketu is in Sagittarius, then you need to go look at where Jupiter is in that person's chart. And then you need to learn what nakshatra Ketu is in. And then after you see the nakshatra that Ketu is in, you need to go see where is the dispositor placed of Ketu. What house is it placed in? That will tell you what will be the aims of your Ketu. And the condition of that dispositor will tell you if Ketu will, behave more benefic or malefic, potentially. You see, Ketu has some of the qualities of Mars. Mars and Ketu are seen to be quite similar, because they both can inflict pain, and they both have this cutting, splitting energy. See, Mars can inflict damage and pain by maybe a physical sense. It might physically harm you or cause fights and arguments depending on its house placements and aspects, or even death. Ketu, it also separates you and causes pain, but not in a physical sense. It might make you lose your home or lose wealth or detach you from love. It can detach you from the things that we find so vital and important. So they both have this splitting, separative energy associated with them. And with Ketu's aspects, it's going to share that separative, disassociative, spiritualizing energy with the houses that it aspects. So, with that being said, and with it being understood that my description of Ketu in its aspects will not fit everyone, because it's not going to be personalized because I don't have your chart. No general reading. No general video on YouTube at all of what does a planet do for a house, or what does a planet do in a sign, will ever personally fit anyone who watches it. It might fit some of y'all, or majority of y'all, but it's not going to be anyone who be like, oh shit, he is right, this 100% fits me. No, it might fit most of y'all or some of y'all, but I would need to look at your chart for the really personalized. Just gotta get that disclaimer out of the way for anyone who might be like, oh, you're phony or this is completely wrong. So, like I said, this is how I interpret K2 in this aspect. So let's say you have K2 and let me think of a house. Let's say you have K2 in the 7th house. Fuck it. Easy peasy explanation. If you have K2 in the 7th house, well, with it just being in that house, it will obviously show some type of struggles with relationships. Naturally. It can show that you've experienced and dealt with relationships in your previous life, over the course of several lives. So therefore, if you haven't acquired so much experience with relationships or whatever, when you get into one, there might just be this awkwardness or unusualness with you being in relationships. Like, I mean, but still, this could apply to anyone, even if they don't have K2 affecting their love life. But we could definitely say it for someone who does have K2 in the 7th house, they might not know what they want romantically. Or they get what they want, they're just not satisfied. It's just like, you know, I thought I wanted this, but this is not what I wanted. So maybe I'll go date and mess with someone else. Someone different. I might date someone who's bisexual. I might date someone who does criminal activities to make their source of income. I might date someone who's just weird and unusual because subconsciously your soul has already maybe done a traditional marriage, a traditional union, dated whatever is considered to be regular type of people. So when you go towards those same things again, it's just like it's like blood, like you're just drinking water. You don't taste nothing. You don't feel nothing. So it might make you be like, you know what, I just don't even want to be in a relationship or a serious relationship. I might be asexual. I don't know what I want. I don't have a huge desire for what is left here on this earth when it comes to dating because I don't either like my options and not satisfied with my options. I just don't feel as though I'm missing out on anything. You might feel like that with K2 being in the 7th house. But now let's look at K2's 5th aspect, which will go into the 11th house. Large social network circles, organizations, gangs, elder siblings. So, with K2's 5th aspect there might be this dissociative energy with, you know, maybe wanting to be in large groups and organizations and whatever. You might not want to be around a bunch of people all the time. Or you might not have too much of a huge desire to maybe want to network with people and make a lot of gains and wealth off of something in general. That doesn't mean if you got K2 in the 7th house that you might just say, fuck the money. I don't want to network with people. I don't want to do business. It doesn't mean that. This is just one line, one piece of a puzzle that I'm looking at, just for the sake of this video, and saying what could possibly be. But with K2's 5th aspect going to the 11th house, it disrupts the things of that house in a material sense. Of course, people would love to have money in a general sense. Of course, people might like to have network circles and connections and maybe a good relationship with the eldest sibling or whatever. But with K2 being there might be some distance between you and those things. Or there might be unsatisfaction between you in those things. You might get the things and then you're not happy when you get them. You know, Ketu can do that with his 5th aspect upon the 11th house. And with Ketu's aspect, 9th aspect upon the 3rd house, I would just say that with his 9th aspect, you could yet again maybe not have the most communicative, best relationship with the siblings. With your because the 3rd house represents younger siblings. It represents neighbors, it represents real communication in general, and skills with your hands. So if Ketu's aspect on the 3rd house, you might not really be too much of a communicative person. Or you might be a very direct person. Because Ketu has that splitting, sharp Mars-like energy. So if you don't really like to communicate with people too much and not deal with people too much, to minimize the conversation, you might be real direct with your communication. So K2 in the 7th house with its 9th aspect going into the 3rd house might make you a straight shooter, a very direct communicator. You might not really like to just ramble and talk about meaningless things. You know, you might want to talk about things that are a little bit of unusualness, you know, a little bit of unorthodox things. But like I said, it all depends on the signs and aspects and all that stuff. You might, like I said, have that distance between you and the siblings. You might not have the desire to really communicate to them or reach out to them that much. You might be separated from social media. You might not want to stay and be on social media that long or all the time. You might deactivate it, reactivate it. You might keep making new accounts. You might just not want to just be that communicator. You might have this disassociative nature potentially. Or you might have speech impediments. Especially if you know if like K2's in the 2nd house or influencing the 2nd lord or 3rd lord. It might sort of damage and separate or spiritualize your form of communication. You might not be someone who is able to speak in a way that people are able to understand you. So that can manifest in different ways. Like I said, you may have an accent, a lisp, struggle saying words. And yeah, and it makes sense. You know why I also said that? It's because K2 doesn't have a head. K2 is just a body. And it's a headless body. That's what K2 is. So it actually makes sense that if you have K2 in the 2nd house in your chart, or if it aspects the 2nd house, or if it aspects the 2nd lord or 3rd lord, you might not be someone who is great and skilled at communication. You might struggle with communication. And because K2 is in the 7th house in your chart, whenever you do business with someone, or whenever you get married, or in like a serious relationship with someone, like you see them a lot, or you're like living together, these frames with the 3rd and with the aspect of the 3rd house and the 11th house would really come alive, because you're activating the 7th house if you're doing business, because 10 places from the 10th house to the 7th house, and marriage is the 7th house, so you'll activate the K2. Or if you're living with someone like romantically and you're not married, that's still like a marriage like situation, so you'll really see these things come alive when you do those type of things. So let's do K2 and see, it's easy for me to do Rahu and Ketu aspects when you're talking about the Dharma, when I'm talking about the Artha houses, which is 2, 6, 10, and the Kama houses, which is 3, 7, 11. Let's say you have Ketu in the 8th house. This will be the last example I use. So if you got Ketu in the 8th house, this naturally shows you have great interest and wanting to research and learn about the occultic things. Because K2 represents your past life experiences. K2 got that Mars cutting, drilling energy associated with it. Now you might be thinking, oh Jordan, you just said that, you know, because of K2's placement, it shows that you already experienced that thing. So when you go towards it again, you might not be interested when you are diving into it. Well, these shadow planets are a bit weird. So yes, like I said, like when I said with K2 in the 7th house, when you go towards it again, you might be unsatisfied. You know? Because it depends. It just depends on how your chart is set up. It's like you have this energy of K2 in your chart, but everyone isn't into astrology. You don't know that when you go towards these things, you just become uninterested. But you see, Ketu is a significator of moksha, spiritual liberation, separation from this body. And the 8th house is a moksha house. 4, 8, and 12 are moksha houses. So Ketu does sort of good when it's in the 4th, 8th, and 12th. Because they both represent, or one of their main, because their motivations align with one another. And also the 8th house is associated with death. It's associated with death, injuries, and surgeries. What better way? How many other better ways is it for you to experience moksha, separation from the material world, other than getting killed, other than dying? So in that sense, Ketu sort of excels being in the eighth house. And even though if I was, personify Ketu and be like, oh, I'm in the eighth house of occult, mysticism, and taboo, and sex. I've already researched and done these things before in my previous past life. And there's nothing that no one can tell me about these. There's nothing that no one can tell me about the eighth house. But still, even though there's nothing that no one can tell me about the eighth house, I still want to sort of go and research it or learn it again. Like, if you got Ketu in the eighth house, and maybe someone is telling you I'm getting tongue-tied. I understand this placement. It's just that I gotta find a way to communicate it. But essentially with Ketu being in the eighth house, you could want to do your own damn research versus someone telling you about astrology, versus someone telling you about, taboo occult stuff. You might want to actually learn it and do it yourself. And you would excel at doing it because you already got the skills from a previous past life in doing it. You would be naturally good at it. Ketu in the eighth house, you could potentially see paranormal spirits and ghosts and stuff like that. Why? Well, because if you got Ketu in the eighth house, that means you got Rahu in the second house. And the second house deals with the face. It deals with this area. The second house contains the eyes. Rahu represents otherworldly things. Rahu in the second house can make you see potentially otherworldly things. And then Ketu, messing and dabbling with occult, secretive things, just this axis alone could show that you could just be someone who is very great, very skilled at uncovering secrets. And since the eighth house also represents in-laws and essentially life after marriage, you could be someone who is great at uncovering like the secrets of your in-laws, of your spouse's family, or uncovering the secrets of your spouse, the people that you date. You could be someone who just have great interest and want to read a bunch of spiritual texts or astrology books. Why? Because Ketu is the past life experience. It shows that you have experience and skills in those things. And you know why you'll keep reading and reading and reading and researching and looking at all my videos or other occult videos? It's because you're not satisfied. There you go. You see, the unsatisfying nature. There you go. The unsatisfaction. That's what I was trying to say. The unsatisfaction of Ketu in the eighth house will make you want to keep learning and doing more. You'll read one astrology book and you'll be like, oh, this isn't enough. I want more. I want more. I want more. I want more astrology. Or I just read the Bible. It was cool. I want to read Buddhism. I want to read the Quran, the Torah. I want to read the Vedas. I want to read all these spiritual texts. Yeah, I learned astrology. Yes, I can do predictions. But you know what? I want to learn how to do Reiki healing. I want to learn how to do Akashic records. I want to learn how to do tarot readings. So Ketu in the eighth house can make you master and learn all of these things. And you might not notice it. And you might not be unsatisfied. But it just makes you want to keep learning. That unsatisfaction of Ketu can make you want to just keep finding something to learn and research that is of the occult nature. Because Ketu isn't satisfied. Now, you might not be satisfied. You might be satisfied. You might love this stuff. But it's that Ketu energy still that is making you want to keep learning and doing these type of things. So Ketu in the eighth house is a great placement. And definitely can show someone who is into the mystic stuff. But everyone who got Ketu in the 8th house, it doesn't mean that they're into astrology, of course. There's regular everyday people who are not into it, who have this axis. Of course, you have to look at the expositors and all that stuff, and sign placements. But I guess in a more common day-to-day sense, someone could be a spy, someone could be a detective. You could be good at reading contracts and finding loopholes. You could be good at, like, okay, this person just offered me a deal. They want this much. They want this much percentage of my company. Because I look at a lot of Shark Tank. I like looking at Shark Tank. They're like, hey, he offered me a deal. He said that he'll give me the money I want, but he want 51% of my company. He want this much royalty and this, that. Oh, and it sounds good. We shake hands. We got a deal. But when it comes to signing the paperwork, you be like, hold on, I'm reading this paperwork. It says that you're going to do this, or you can do this, and you can do that, and you can kick me out of my company. But that's not what we said. And you'll be able to you could naturally just be able to find the loopholes, read the fine print with Ketu being in the 8th house. Because one, you have Rahu in the 2nd house, and this is just my interpretation. Because you got the eyes, so you can just see things. And you have Ketu in the 8th house, which shows occult, secret, taboo things. So this axis could be great for uncovering secrets with Rahu and Ketu being there. And I could go on and on with this, but let's move on to the aspects. So 5th from the 8th is the 12th. The 12th house represents foreign lands, foreign things, long distant things, places of isolation like a prison, jail, rehabilitation, hospitals, a desert. And the 12th house also represents damn, I forgot what else I was about to say about the 12th house. It just exited my thought. But ironically, the 12th house represents exit. It's the final house. It's the last house associated with the last sign. The 12th house represents the subconscious. There we go. It represents bed pleasure. Why the hell does the 12th house represent bed pleasure? I honestly didn't I didn't know that the 12th house was associated with sex until I started looking at KRS's videos. I'm like, why is it associated with sex? And I don't think he ever gave no explanation. And I finally understood it for myself. Because think about this. I'm getting off topic, but I don't care. Y'all gonna listen and learn this. I'm getting off topic, but think about this. What are some of the obstacles within a marriage? Cheating and financial issues. Those are one of the things. Of course, lying can be one of them, and inconsistency. But think about this. What house is associated with marriage? The 7th house. 6 places from the 7th house is the 12th house. So therefore, the 6th from the 7th house will be the obstacles within your marriage, the obstacles within a relationship. So therefore, one of the obstacles that could be within a relationship is hidden affairs, sexual encounters, financial losses, or maybe you just being separative and distant from the marriage. You spending more time somewhere else than you are with your spouse, than you are with your family. Because the 12th house represents isolation and foreign things. You're getting away. You're escaping, So the 12th house can represent the obstacles of the marriage, which could be sexual pleasures, sexual encounters, So, yeah, those are some of the things that the 12th house represents. So with Ketu's 5th aspect going into the 12th house, it just sort of just puts a further stamp on you just being very disassociative. Because with Ketu in the 8th house, it can also separate you or give you no interest in maybe wanting to connect with your in-laws, with the spouse family. You might have a distant or not really much of a connection and relationship with your in-laws. And with Ketu going into the 12th house, it could show that you might really just desire to maybe just get lost, to just get away from the family, or get away from the world by going into the 12th house, by going to isolated places. You might want to just be separated. You might just want to go into the forest. You might just want to go into the beach, but maybe to a beach or near the water or a time of day where it's not really crowded and filled with people. You just might want to get away, because that's what the 12th house is. You know, you just want to escape. So you just have an interest in wanting to maybe escape from the world from time to time. And with Ketu's ninth aspect going into the 4th house, the 4th house represents the relationship with the mother. It represents the home life. It represents, essentially it. The home life and the relationship with the mother. It can represent fixed assets like a house. So, with Ketu being aspecting the 4th house with his 9th aspect, it can naturally separate you from the family that you came from. It could make you be someone who cannot sit still. You cannot sit within your house. Or like maybe when you was growing up, you just couldn't sit in the house. You always had to move for whatever reason. The relationship you had with your family might have been so turbulent or whatever. You just didn't want to stay in the house. You wanted to get the fuck out. Why would you do that? Because Rahu is in the 2nd house. If Ketu's in the 8th, Rahu's in the 2nd. Rahu is disrupting the relationship with the family that you come from, because the 2nd house represents the family that you come from. The 4th house of anybody's chart also represents the happiness of the household, that overall happiness of the native. Why? Because the 4th house is a moksha house. Moksha doesn't always just mean spiritual liberation. Moksha can also represent, where you feel as though a place that you feel as though that you can escape to. Typically, your home is a place that you feel as though that you can escape to, that you can exit, that you can relax and rest. Being within your mother's arms, typically, a mother's love, is typically a place that you feel that you can escape from the world, that you can feel safe and comforted. So moksha can also, in maybe a humanized, personalized, modernized sense, it can mean that. So, with Ketu's 9th aspect going into the 4th house, it's spiritualizing those things. It's separating you from the material things that you are so familiar with. It can make you, maybe, for whatever reason, I don't know how it'll play out in your life, you might not just want to stay in a house that much. Because there are people out there who either, have like a damaged 4th house and 4th lord, or have this axis. And these are just people, they just don't want to return home. They stay out all day. They find any excuse to not have to go back in the house, because they don't enjoy their living conditions. They don't enjoy who they have to return home to. So they find any excuse to stay out. You just get finished hanging out with a person, and then after they finish hanging out with you, they hit someone else up so that they can hang out with them or spend a night there. They don't want to return home. They're not necessarily getting beat on or abused. They just don't want to be home, or they could be abused. It just depends. What else could Ketu do? You might have a negative relationship with the mother or mother figures in your life, with Ketu aspect in the 4th house. But that's essentially what Ketu does with his aspects. I don't necessarily put so much emphasis on, the 5th and 9th aspect in the sense of like what I did with my Jupiter video. Like when I said the 5th aspect, you just might want to play around or do that thing as a hobby, and the 9th aspect you want to master it. I don't really do that with Rahu and Ketu's aspects. I just simply look at the sign that Rahu is in, that Ketu is in, the nakshatra that it is in. I look at the condition of the dispositor. If it's under negative influences, well then it might really give harsh, separative, negative effects. If it's in positive conditions, then it might not really be so bad. But you really gotta study those things, because that will decide what Rahu and Ketu do. Rahu and Ketu, they have their own natural significations, as I have told you, but The bulk of what they will do depends on those things I just said, because they don't produce their own light. They're not something physical that you can touch. So therefore, the foundation of who they are is really based upon their sign. They steal from everything. They steal who they are from everyone else, you know? Just like the moon reflects the light of the sun. It doesn't produce its own light. It needs the light of the sun to shine. Mercury, who is the child of the moon in Hindu mythology, it also is a planet that is hard to interpret unless you know the sign that is in and what's aspect in it. Mercury, Moon, and Rahu and Ketu are chameleon-like grahas, chameleon-like planetary bodies that greatly get their characteristics and who they are based upon sign, the location of the nurture lord, and the dispositor. So I hope that this video helped give you some clarity and understanding on what happens with K2 and its aspects, and see you next time. Thanks for watching.